Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. You know how this works. We're taking a deep dive into India today, specifically March 17th, 2025, looking at the top headlines. And let me tell you, we've got a pretty wide spread this time. You guys found some really interesting stuff for us to dig into. We've got the economy, global politics, social issues, even a bit of culture and sports thrown in for good measure.
Yeah.
It's all connected, right? So let's see if we can find those connections and really understand what this all means for India right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real cross-section of what's happening in India, and when you look at them together, it's not just a bunch of random news stories. It actually starts to paint a picture of India's ambitions, the challenges it's facing, and how it's all kind of woven together.
Exactly. So let's jump right into a big one. Make in India, it's been this huge goal for India for years, becoming this global manufacturing hub, especially now with everyone looking for alternatives to China, that old China plus one strategy. But one of the headlines we've got today suggests it's not quite working out the way they hoped.
Right. And what's interesting is the reason why. It seems like while India's been pushing this Make in India idea, other smaller countries, especially Vietnam, have actually been more successful in attracting that foreign investment. And the articles really point to the same things holding India back: bureaucracy, import policies, and regulations that seem to change all the time. It's like they're trying to attract businesses on one hand, but the system itself makes it really hard to actually set up shop there.
It makes you wonder, right? I mean, a whole decade of pushing this goal. And yeah, there's been progress,
Yeah.
but they haven't quite gotten where they wanted to be.
It really shows the difference between a vision and making it a reality. The sources talk about investments that just haven't happened, bureaucratic hurdles that haven't been cleared. It seems like making India a manufacturing powerhouse needs more than just a good slogan. It needs real, fundamental changes to make it actually work for businesses.
For sure. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and look at something on the international stage. New Zealand's Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, is visiting India, and there's a lot of talk about strengthening economic ties.
Definitely. And the fact that this is Luxon's first official trip and he's brought a whole delegation of business leaders and community members, it shows how important India is to New Zealand. Luxon actually said something interesting. He talked about how India plays a vital role in New Zealand's prosperity, its security, and even its society. It's a pretty big statement.
And they're starting negotiations for an FTA, a free trade agreement. Essentially, it means making it easier and cheaper to trade between the two countries. And that could be a pretty big deal, right?
It definitely could be. If you look at India's overall trade strategy, they're really pushing for these FTAs. They already finalized one with Australia a couple of years ago, and now they're doing this with New Zealand. It shows how proactive they're being about these global economic partnerships. And considering they already do over $1 billion in bilateral trade, an FTA could really boost that even further.
It'll be interesting to see how those negotiations go. India's had mixed success with these in the past. And it's not just about trade either. Luxon's also the chief guest at the Rosina Dialogue. So it seems like they're trying to build a bigger, stronger relationship between the two countries, not just economically.
Exactly. It's about more than just buying and selling stuff. It's about building a strategic partnership, maybe even cooperation on things like defense and security. This visit seems like a way to lay the groundwork for a much deeper relationship between India and New Zealand.
Okay, so we've talked about Make in India and now this New Zealand visit. Now let's look at how global events can have a real impact on India. One headline talks about the U.S.-China trade war and what it could mean for Indian chemical exporters. Sounds like it could be good news or bad news depending on how it plays out.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the U.S. has put a 20% tariff on everything coming from China. Now, that could be great for Indian companies trying to sell chemicals to the U.S. Suddenly, their stuff's cheaper than what's coming out of China.
But I guess the other side of that is what happens in the rest of the world, right? If Chinese chemical companies can't sell to the U.S. as easily, they'll be looking to sell more elsewhere, places where Indian companies are already selling.
Exactly. And India exports a lot of chemicals. We're talking over $20 billion worth in 2023-24 alone. And the U.S. is their biggest customer, taking about 14% of that. So any big changes in global demand are going to have a big impact on India. And then there's the worry that the U.S. might decide to slap tariffs on Indian goods, too. Companies like PI Industries and Venati Organics, they could get hit pretty hard.
So a potential opportunity in the U.S., but also a lot of competition in other markets, and maybe even some new tariffs to worry about. And all this while India's chemical sector is supposed to be growing like crazy over the next few years.
It just shows you how connected everything is, right? What happens between the US and China can have a direct impact on businesses in India. It makes things really complicated.
All right, let's shift gears again. There's a headline here about a fight between laborers in Bengaluru that ended tragically. It's a really sad story, and it makes you think about the kind of tensions that can simmer just below the surface in these communities.
This is just a terrible incident, you know. From what we've gathered, it seems like a fight between some laborers from Bihar at a construction site, and it escalated incredibly quickly. Allegedly, it started with some inappropriate comments about someone's sister and ended with two guys being attacked with a wooden log and an iron rod. Two others who tried to step in and help also lost their lives. It's just a horrific situation.
And it's hard to believe that it started over something so seemingly small. I mean, an argument after a phone call. It's just tragic how quickly things can escalate.
This is a stark reminder of how easily things can get out of control. These kinds of disputes, especially among migrant workers who are often facing a lot of pressure and stress, they can quickly become violent.
Thankfully, it seems like the police have detained a couple people, and they're still looking for the main suspects. Hopefully, justice will be served. It's just a reminder that there are always better ways to settle disagreements than resorting to violence.
Absolutely. Violence never solves anything. And hopefully this tragedy will lead to more dialogue and understanding within these communities to prevent something like this from happening again.
Okay, let's move on to a headline with a much broader focus. China's rise and India's ambition to become a leader in the global south. This comes from a speech by the Indian Army Chief, General Upendra Dwivedi.
This is a really interesting perspective on India's place on the world stage. General Dwivedi is essentially saying that China's growing power is something India has to reckon with as it tries to build its own influence, especially with countries in the global south.
He does acknowledge that India has some big advantages, a huge and young population, a democratic system, and a strategically important location. But he also admits that India isn't quite as powerful on the global stage as China is right now.
It's a realistic assessment. You know, democracy and demographics are great, but they don't automatically translate into global power. India needs to play its cards right and close the gap with China, especially in terms of economics and technology.
And one of his suggestions is to strengthen ties with Africa. He sees it as a potential power center of the future. And he also talks a lot about the importance of technology for national security.
What's really interesting is how he talks about Africa. He recognizes that the global power balance is shifting and that regions like Africa are becoming more and more important. And the emphasis on technology, especially things like artificial intelligence, data, and the link between military and civilian tech, it shows a real understanding of how power works in the 21st century.
And he's pushing for India to be more active in international groups like BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and even pushing for reforms in the UN Security Council. It all points to India wanting a bigger say in global affairs.
Definitely. He lays out a vision where India takes a leading role in peacekeeping, development, fighting terrorism, and leveraging the Indian diaspora. It's a pretty ambitious plan.
It is. It's like India saying, hey, we're here, we're powerful, and we're ready to take a leading role on the world stage. But they're also realistic about the challenges they face, especially from a rising China.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, projecting strength while also understanding the complexities of global politics.
All right, let's move on to a headline that's a bit more domestic. Delhi's Chief Minister, Rekha Gupta, attended an Iftar event hosted by the BJP's Minority Morcha. This seems like a pretty significant gesture, especially during Ramadan.
It's definitely interesting. In a country as diverse as India, these kinds of interfaith events are really important, especially during religious festivals. It's a way to build bridges and share respect between communities. And the fact that they're emphasizing unity and harmony is really important in today's political climate.
And it wasn't just the chief minister. Some big names from the BJP were there too, including Union Minister Kiran Rijiju. It seems like the party's making a real effort to reach out to minority communities.
Especially after their big win in the Delhi Assembly elections, it makes sense. These Iftar events, especially with the chief minister and other prominent leaders attending, it sends a message of inclusivity. They're saying, we're here for everyone.
And Chief Minister Gupta even posted on social media about it, talking about mutual respect, love, and harmony. It's good to see these kinds of messages being shared.
It's all part of what they call soft power, building relationships and understanding through cultural and social engagement. It can be just as important as economic or military power.
Now, there's a headline here that's a bit more concerning. It's about a Columbia University student, Ranjani Srinivasan, an Indian-American PhD student whose student visa was revoked. It sounds like a pretty complicated situation with some serious implications.
Yeah, it really raises some questions about how much freedom of expression international students have in the U.S. Apparently, Srinivasan had her visa revoked and was even kicked out of Colombia because she allegedly supported Hamas. And she ended up fleeing to Canada because she was worried about what might happen to her.
There's a quote from Rishi Kumar, a tech exec and Democratic Party member, saying that studying in the U.S. is a privilege, not a right, and there are conditions attached to that privilege. It seems like a pretty strong warning to international students.
It shows a certain perspective, right? That if you're an international student, you need to follow the rules and be careful about what you say and do, especially when it comes to politics. And the fact that the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, actually shared a video about Srinivasan's case, it shows how seriously they're taking this.
It's a reminder that studying abroad comes with responsibilities. And sometimes, the rules and consequences can be pretty harsh, especially in a climate where security concerns are high. And it seems like Srinivasan herself wasn't even completely sure why her visa was revoked. It all sounds very unsettling.
It really highlights the precarious situation many international students find themselves in. You're in a new country, you're trying to navigate a complex system, and maybe you don't fully understand all the rules. It's a cautionary tale for anyone thinking about studying abroad.
We also have a headline about an Oxford historian, Manikarnika Dutta, an Indian-British woman facing deportation from the UK. It seems like a case where very strict immigration rules might end up hurting someone who's actually contributed a lot to British society.
It's another one of those cases that makes you question how flexible these immigration systems really are. Dutta's been living and working in the UK for over a decade. She was doing research in India as part of her job at Oxford, and it seems like she accidentally overstayed her allowed absence period.
Yeah, she was gone for 691 days, and the limit is 548 days. Now they're telling her she has to leave voluntarily or face a re-entry ban, maybe even prosecution. It seems pretty extreme considering she's built a whole life and career in the UK.
And it's not like she was trying to break the rules. She was doing research for one of the most prestigious universities in the world. It raises the question of whether these rules should be applied so rigidly, especially when you consider how much someone like Dutta contributes to the UK. It sparks a debate about fairness and whether the system should be more understanding in these kinds of situations.
It's a reminder that these immigration systems, while necessary, can sometimes be very inflexible and end up hurting people who are actually valuable members of society. It's a tough situation all around.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that sometimes the human side of the story gets lost in the bureaucracy.
Let's switch gears to something a bit more uplifting. There's a headline about Prime Minister Modi talking about India's cultural identity on a podcast with Lex Fridman. It gives some interesting insight into how he sees India.
It's a great example of how these podcasts can reach a global audience and share different perspectives. Modi really used this platform to explain his view of what makes India unique. He talked about India as an ancient civilization with incredible diversity.
Yeah, he really emphasized the sheer number of languages and dialects in India, and how customs, food, and even clothing can change drastically every few miles. He painted this picture of India as this incredibly vibrant and diverse tapestry.
And he didn't just talk about diversity, he talked about it as a source of strength, a defining feature of India's cultural identity. He sees it as something that unites India, not divides it. It's a powerful message.
It's that whole idea of unity and diversity, right? It's a concept that's deeply ingrained in India's self-image. And Modi, using a platform like Lex Fridman's podcast to share this view with the world, is pretty smart.
It's a way to shape perceptions and promote understanding of India's unique cultural identity.
Okay, let's talk about something that always gets India excited, the start of the Indian Premier League, the IPL. It sounds like the opening ceremony in Kolkata is going to be pretty spectacular.
The IPL always knows how to put on a show, and this year is no different. They've got a great mix of cricket and Bollywood entertainment lined up.
Yeah, they've got big Bollywood stars like Shraddha Kapoor and Varun Dhawan performing, and the incredibly popular singer Arjit Singh is also on the bill. It's going to be a huge event.
And it all kicks off at the iconic Eden Gardens, which always adds to the atmosphere. The energy is going to be electric. And then, of course, we have the first match, Kolkata Knight Riders versus Royal Challengers Bangalore. It's a great way to start the tournament.
The IPL has become such a massive cultural phenomenon in India. It's not just about cricket. It's an event that brings the whole country together.
Absolutely. It's a celebration of sport, entertainment, and national pride. And it's gained a huge following around the world, too. The IPL is a global brand now.
From Bollywood to cricket. Let's move on to another big success story, the film Chhaava. It's doing incredibly well at the box office, even surpassing some of the recent big hits.
It's a remarkable achievement. Chhaava is now the 8th highest-grossing Indian film domestically. It's overtaken movies like Animal and Pathan. And the most impressive part is that it's not a big franchise film. It's a standalone story that's resonated with audiences because of its strong narrative.
The film tells the story of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, a revered historical figure. And it seems like this historical drama has really captured the imagination of moviegoers.
It speaks to the enduring power of these historical narratives in Indian cinema. The film's success shows that audiences appreciate stories that connect them with their history and heritage. And it's not just a domestic success, it's done well internationally, too.
It's refreshing to see a film succeed based on its story and word of mouth, especially in an industry often dominated by big-budget sequels and franchises. It's a testament to the director and the cast, and a reminder that great storytelling can still draw crowds.
Absolutely. Chhaava's success is a win for storytelling and for celebrating India's rich history.
Sticking with sports, let's celebrate the Mumbai Indians' victory in the Women's Premier League, the WPL. They've won their second title, and it's a fantastic achievement for the team and for women's cricket in India.
This is a big moment for women's cricket. The Mumbai Indians winning their second WPL title shows how dominant they've become in the league. And the final match against the Delhi Capitals sounds like it went down to the wire, with Mumbai winning by just 8 runs.
It's great to see the WPL growing in popularity and attracting more attention. It's giving female cricketers the platform and recognition they deserve.
Absolutely. And the growth is reflected in everything. The increasing salaries for the players, the bigger broadcast deals, and the fact that the tournament's expanding to new cities. It's clear that the WPL is here to stay and is only going to get bigger.
It's inspiring to see how this league is inspiring young girls across India and South Asia to take up cricket. It's creating opportunities that weren't there before.
The investment in the WPL, both in the franchises and the media rights, shows that people believe in the future of women's cricket in India. And the Mumbai Indians' victory is another step towards making India a global powerhouse in women's cricket.
Let's shift gears to the real estate market. It looks like Indian developers are increasingly targeting non-resident Indians, or NRIs, as potential buyers. What's driving this trend?
It seems like there's been a bit of a slowdown in the domestic real estate market in India. Sales have dropped, and developers are looking for new buyers. And NRIs are a pretty attractive market, especially with the rupee weakening against other currencies. Property in India is a pretty good deal for people earning in dollars or pounds.
So basically, for someone living and earning in the US or the UK, buying property in India has become relatively cheaper.
Exactly. And developers are seeing a lot of interest from NRIs, particularly those living in places with large Indian communities like the US, the UK, the UAE, Canada, and Singapore. Companies like DLF are reporting a significant increase in sales to NRIs.
There's a statistic here that's interesting. The National Capital Region, or NCR, was the only area that saw an increase in new home sales in the last quarter of 2024. Maybe that's where a lot of the NRI interest is focused.
Yeah, there's a project in Gurugram, Pravana West, where over a quarter of the buyers were NRIs. It's a good example of how developers are specifically targeting this market, highlighting things like India's economic growth and the lifestyle benefits of living there.
It seems like a smart move for developers. Tapping into this new market can help them weather the current slowdown and continue to grow their businesses.
It's all about adapting to changing market conditions and finding new opportunities. And NRIs are a significant potential market for the Indian real estate sector.
Okay, we've got one more political headline to discuss before we wrap things up. Arvind Kejriwal, the leader of the Aam Aadmi Party, or AAP, has come out and strongly reaffirmed that Bhagwant Mann will remain the chief minister of Punjab. It seems like he's trying to put an end to some rumors that were circulating.
Yeah, after AAP lost the Delhi elections, there was a lot of speculation about whether there would be some changes in Punjab, too. Kejriwal's statement is a way to shut those rumors down and show that the party is united behind Mann.
And then there's this whole controversy about Kejriwal meeting with a BJP official. It sounds like things are still pretty tense between those two parties.
Definitely. The BJP accused Kejriwal of trying to cut a deal with them, while AAP insists it was just a courtesy call. It just shows how every interaction between these parties is scrutinized and can easily turn into a political football.
And to top it off, Kejriwal went to Amritsar, visited the Golden Temple, and talked about tackling drug abuse and corruption in Punjab. It seems like he's trying to reassure people that AAP is still focused on governing the state effectively.
Absolutely. It's about projecting stability and showing that AAP is committed to addressing the issues that matter to the people of Punjab. It's an important state for AAP, and they can't afford to lose ground there.
So, a mix of political maneuvering and a reminder that the work of governing goes on, even amidst all the noise and speculation.
That's politics for you. Always something going on, and it's never straightforward.
All right, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into today's headlines from India. We've covered a lot from economics and diplomacy to social issues, culture, and sports. It's a real snapshot of what's happening in this incredibly dynamic and complex country.
And as always, we encourage you to think about the connections between these stories. How might India's ambition to become a manufacturing powerhouse affect its relationships with countries like New Zealand? How do global events like the US-China trade war trickle down and impact industries and businesses in India?
These headlines aren't just isolated incidents. They're all part of a larger narrative, a story about India's aspirations, challenges, and its place in the world. And they all reflect the hopes, dreams, and struggles of the people who make up this incredible nation.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and inspired you to learn more about India. What stood out to you? What questions do you have? This is just the beginning of the conversation.